In this video, we're going to talk about how to graph a line two different ways based on the form in which your equation is given. So here's our first equation, negative 2x plus y equals 5. So this equation is in the form that we call standard form. So standard form is ax plus by equals c. Your x and your y are on the same side of the equation, and your constant is on the other side. Your a, your b, and your c are just constants. So for this particular problem, a is negative 2, b is 1, even though we don't have it written there, and c is 5. In our second equation that we're going to graph, this is in slope-intercept form. Y is equal to mx plus b. Yes, your y is on the other side, but you can always rewrite this equation. Just switch everything around. Y is equal to x minus 1. You don't change any signs because you're just rearranging the way in which the problem is written. You're changing the y from being on the right to being on the left, and you're changing x minus 1 from being on the left to being on the right. And this is called our slope-intercept form. So with standard form, typically what you would want to do here is you would want to find your x and y intercept to graph. This is just one technique for how you can graph. So to do this, to find your x-intercept, which is where your graph crosses the x-axis, you would set y equal to 0, then solve for x. So you have a negative 2x plus y equals 5. We would replace y with 0, and then now we're going to solve for x by dividing by negative 2. So our x is negative 5 divided by 2, or negative 2.5, negative 2.5. To find your y-intercept, you do the exact opposite, but your y-intercept is where your graph crosses the y-axis. So you set the opposite variable equal to 0, so this time you set x equal to 0, and then you want to solve for y. So in this case, we have negative 2x plus y equals 5. We are going to replace y with 0. So we would have, replace x with 0. So 0 times anything is just 0. So you'll just be left with y is equal to 5. Sometimes you can see your intercepts written as ordered pairs. So here we made x 0, and your y we solved for was 5. In this particular problem, our x was negative 2.5, and our y we set to 0. So to graph these, you would plot your points. So we'll plot the point of negative 2.5 and 0. Our x is negative 2.5. So starting from the origin, we move to the left, negative 2.5, my y is 0. So I will place a point there. Your next point, you have y is equal to 5, so your point is, your x is 0, and then your y is 5. And then what you do is you do your best to draw a line between these 2 points. So in StatCrunch, not StatCrunch, but in Alex, once you plot those 2 points, you go over to the box and you select the last line to draw your line. And for your lines, you always want to make sure, if you're doing this on paper, to put arrows at the end to symbolize it goes on and on and on forever. So your second equation that we have is written in slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept form gives you two different pieces of information. So we'll keep intercept form, you're given two different pieces of information, and the name of this format helps you. So it's called slope-intercept form because you're given two pieces of information. Here's your standard equation. Here's your equation. So m is your slope, which we also call as our rise over our run. It tells us how far to go up or down, and then our denominator tells us how far to go to the right. If your slope is positive, that means you're going to go up. If your slope is negative, you're going to go down, and the denominator, we're always going to go to the right, just to make our life easier. The second piece of information, B, is your y-intercept. Yes, this is the same y-intercept from up here. It's just in this format, you automatically know what the y-intercept is. You don't have to solve for anything. So in this particular problem, our slope is a -1. I'm sorry, your slope is a +1. Your y-intercept is a -1. So when you're graphing using your slope and y-intercept, the first thing you do is to graph your y-intercept. This is your starting place. So your y-intercept is whatever is added or subtracted onto your equation. Here you're subtracting 1. So that's going to be the first point that we plot at -1. And then from that point, what we do is we use our slope. So we already said our slope is our rise divided by our run. So here, since our slope is just a whole number, you can always put whole numbers over 1. So you just have 1/1. So from that point, you go up 1, you go to the right 1, and that's how you get a point on your line. And you can always reuse your slope. You can go up another 1, go to the right another 1, and then draw your line to connect these 2 points. So that's how you graph a line using 2 different techniques. Now you can, of course, always switch the techniques. If you prefer using slope-intercept form, then you can just do that way. If you prefer using standard form, you can just do that way. The benefit of knowing both methods is sometimes one method is easier than the other depending upon the situation. So if you wanted to graph this first one using slope-intercept techniques, you would first have to solve this equation for y. So here it's pretty simple to solve for y. Your opposite of subtracting 2x, you're going to add 2x on both sides. So 2x plus 5. And then you would do the same techniques you had here. Your y-intercept is 5, so that will be the first point that you plot. And then your slope is 2, and since it's a whole number, you would rise 2 and go to the right 1. So you see, you get the same exact line, it's just a different technique in order to do the same exact thing.